welcome to Cage Minds Uncensored. I'm Micah Frankel. A shout out to Edwin Ruiz, Mac 10, the I Got Your Back anti-bullying campaign. Give them a like on Facebook, MMA CK10. Gonna start off today with offering up some congratulations. Jordan Espinosa, the third round finish. Bavon Lewis getting it done in the first round last week at the Tough Gym. Both now members of the UFC roster. Had the great opportunity to talk to both guys in preparation to the fight. So awesome to see them now where they belong, along with the upper echelon in MMA, part of the UFC. Can't wait to see what both of them do. A lot of big expectations now on both guys. We also got congratulations to Manny Pacquiao taking out Lucas Matisse, picking up another world title. You had Regis Prograis handling Juan Jose Velasco, who had the opportunity to see at Buffalo Thunder. So there were some titles changing hands in boxing. Now for the MMA world, we had a ton of stuff going on this past week, including Bellator with two events, starting off in Thackerville, Oklahoma, the WinStar World Casino, and the prelims got going, making a big impact. Steve Cazzola showing off fast hands, smooth combinations, picking up a quick TKO victory after a solid 8-0 start to his professional career. Back-to-back losses. This was a much needed, desperately needed victory from the Chicago native. Great to see him in the win column. You had Yaroslav Amarevs in the welterweight division and showing the depth at 170 that Bellator has, handling in dominant fashion, outstriking and outgrappling UFC vet Gerald Harris, possibly earning himself an entrance into the upcoming Bellator welterweight Grand Prix. You had Veta Ortega handling Emily Ducote. It was the aggression. It was the brawling. It was doing what Veta does and just being better at it, not allowing Emily to get her submission game off. Big win there for Ortega. You had Valentin Medovsky kicking off the main card, beating up and closing the left eye of Ernest James. Medovsky, the Team Fedor representative, taking down the AKA representative. Medovsky, obviously somebody to keep an eye on in the Bellator heavyweight division. Chris Honeycutt defeats Leo Lede, a great right hand in round one. Round two, busting up Lede with knees and being able to control the grappling, that wrestling side ride. Back in the win column is Chris Honeycutt. Michael Mayday McDonald, after a big leg kick, went teep kick with the right leg, follow up right hand, that power hand in front. The orthodox fighter standing southpaw for this technique, cracking Eduardo Dantas and finishing the former Bellator bantamweight champion in 58 seconds. When the right hand connects, a nasty fall from Dantas. Still awaiting words, but it looks like the Brazilian broke his right ankle. The way his body crumbled from that punch, wasn't able to regain balance, was taken to the hospital and was carried out of the cage. A nasty scene there. The headlining bout, the Bellator women's featherweight title on the line. Julia Budd, undefeated Brazilian Talita Nogueira, and Budd took Nogueira into the clinch, beat her up with knees, and then took the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt to the ground, beat her up with elbows, and was relentless, finally forcing the ref to jump in, TKO from strikes in the third round. A big right hand from Budd was what really started to rock Nogueira in that third round. A dominant performance from the 145 champion there in Bellator, and the whole night leading up to the fight, you gotta admire the way Bellator was selling Budd. We gotta be honest. After winning the fight with a TKO of Marlos Kuning and riding a big wave of momentum, Budd Bud fell short in that non exciting, non action packed, pretty boring title defense against Arlene Blencow. Rebound beautifully here at Bellator 202 with a dominant performance. But the whole night in lead up, instead of in some promotions, they would reflect back on that most recent performance. You laid an egg, it's what it is, and we're going to point that out. You need to move on and be better from it. Bellator erased it from memory and just kept focusing on Bud won the title by taking down one of the greatest women fighters ever in Marloes Coenen. That's what we want you to remember. That's how great she was. Never even touching again on laying an egg in that Blencow fight and barely retaining her title. Bellator chose to focus on the positive, and that's something that the fighters, I think the fighters that are free agents, that are up and coming and looking for where do I want to sign, that's going to play a part into your mentality, into your decision-making process, seeing the way that they're going to try to shine a spotlight on your positives rather than reflect on the negatives. Again, a big performance from Julia Budd. You saw her ground game, her clinch game, and some striking at distance. We know that there are tensions right now brewing between Cyborg and the UFC. Obviously, the UFC is not interested in 145 pounds. They are interested in that weight class for the sole purpose of Chris Cyborg. But I can't blame them. It's not like Invicta has a thriving division. It's not like Bellator is having women's 145-pound fights all the time. It feels like an inevitability, and it is that after the presumed super fight between Nunez and Cyborg will either jump over to boxing, or seriously, the next time we'll see her in a cage will be in Bellator against Julia Budd. Not saying that Bellator has that many 145ers, but they at least have that one attractive fight. The one other legitimate 145er on the planet. Even coming up, Tough 28. Excited to see Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum. We're talking about women's 145ers and men's heavyweights. But Cyborg herself will be the first person to point out all of these women's 145ers that I'm putting up air quotes are normally 135ers. The winner will get the opportunity to face Cyborg. The UFC is trying to push for that tough winner to fight Cyborg, and then for the super fight or vice versa. Not long, though, for Cyborg or for women's 145, do I believe, is there a great future with the UFC. Got totally off base, though, but a Cyborg Julia Budd fight in Bellator, I really do believe, will come probably somewhere in 2019, 2020. But talking about Bellator again, so it was a Bellator heavy weekend, back-to-back events, global takeover, Julia Budd, Michael McDonald, beautiful performances at Bellator 202. Next day, we got Bellator 203. And DAZN, which will be, again, debuting with that Rory McDonald, Gegard Mousasi fight. Much needed because Bellator Kickboxing, Bellator MMA in Rome, Italy. And, of course, on tape delay. So we had all the results for you and ready long before we ever went to Paramount. But no mind that. I guess we'll talk about this the way that Bellator showed it, not the way it happened, because, well, let's talk about the way it happened. Bellator Kickboxing, if you watched the show, preceded Bellator MMA. But obviously, if you were there live in attendance, you could clearly see it was daylight during the kickboxing portion, and that it was nighttime during the MMA portion. And I gotta point out that it was brilliant to the people that made this observation. You think that the UFC is going to WWE with Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Cormier. And then you have Bellator go exactly WWE, where they have the kickboxing and then the MMA. So they do it all on the same mat. You just have the posts. You see how much bigger the MMA surface of fighting is than the ring. They clear the posts. They drop the circular cage from the sky with the lights and the music, just like we saw for the Braun Strowman Kevin Owens match at Extreme Rules. So Bellator always finding a way to keep the showmanship a little more pro wrestling than the WWE. But to no avail, you did see a great performance in the kickboxing ring from Gaston Bolanos. Dominating performance. Giorgio Petrosian, one of the greatest kickboxers of our generation, also dominant, great feints, fakes, great making his opponent react. And then you had the title fight. Featherweight champion Kevin Ross in his first title defense gets the throne quickly. Gabriel Varga with a tight left hook staggers Ross, pursues for the finish, and gets the standing TKO victory 2 minutes and 7 seconds into the first round. Big shout out to Gabriel Varga for giving my video on Instagram at CagedMinds_MMA a like from the highlight of his fight. That was awesome. Talking about the MMA card, Bellator 203, Andrei Korshkov with a spinning back kick right into the right side of Vaso Bakasevic, just puts down his opponent in 66 seconds. Korshakov says he's been offered a spot in the welterweight Grand Prix. That was an obvious one. Can't wait to see what the Spartan does next. In the co-main event, it was Alessio Sakara battling Jamie Sloan into the clinch. Sloan tried to throw a knee, slipped onto his back. The ground and pound followed. Fight lasts 1 minute and 19 seconds. Alessio Sakara now 3-0 in Bellator at 205 pounds. We go up to the main event. The title is on the line. It's the rematch. Pitbull and Vishal. And early, it was Pitbull getting the wrong side of the aggression. Pushing forward, dictating what was happening was Daniel Vishal. But Pitbull would correct that, land big shots, and nearly finish the fight in the second. In the third, Vishal would take it to the ground and get on top. Pitbull in round 4 and round 5 would push forward, land the heavier shots, and just be more active than the tentative Vishal, who looked very concerned with remembering that he had got knocked out, was unable to secure the takedowns in the 4th or 5th, and Pitbull retains by split decision. A very close fight. I could see how you go with the 5th round. Either way, a tight fight. Pitbull now calling out guys from SBG, but the next fight that I'd like for the Friday brother would be against Emmanuel Sanchez. Sanchez has ran through all the former champions, finished his last couple, climbed over and hopped through every hoop that Bellator has put in front of him. I believe that Emmanuel Sanchez versus Patricio Pitbull Freire should be the next title fight at 145. Not James Gallagher jumping in and getting the title fight. Not AJ McKee jumping past Sanchez. I believe that Sanchez has fought the higher caliber of opponents and undoubtedly deserves that title fight. So Bellator went overseas. They went to Rome. They're going to be back there. It looks like they have a good thing brewing there. Betting favorites, again, came out looking pretty strong. All of the great finishes that they showed on Paramount, I do have on the Instagram. So go check those out. Finish off the weekend. We had UFC action. UFC was in Boise, Idaho. And a couple times were the refs just staring at potatoes. You had some strange decisions in certain points. We'll get to those. But the night kicked off with one of the contenders for Fight of the Night, Jessica Aguilar, Jody Escobar, rebooked a fight that was highly anticipated in the women's division there at 115 pounds, and it lived up to the expectations. Aguilar came out aggressive with a lot of volume. Escobar answered back in the second. In the third round, it seemed to be Aguilar pushing a little more. Esquivel, biggest mistake in the fight was allowing herself to get caught with knees on the break. Aguilar would continually get her right hand behind Esquivel's head, and she kept dropping her head, landing those knees on the break, doing the damage to the left eye of Esquivel. I think swayed the judges that slight bit. Jessica Aguilar gets her first victory in the UFC, the former WSOF Women's Strawweight Champion. You saw Hani Barcelos land some big shots, devastating Kurt Holloway, getting the finish, talking about the right overhand and uppercut being very effective. Barcelos getting that finish in the third round. To most people, it appeared that Justin Scoggins had outstruck and had kind of manipulated with his footwork what Said Nurmagomedov was doing, but the judges saw it as Nurmagomedov pushing forward. A split decision goes the way of the debuting Russian. Kind of surprising when you watch the fight. That was one bad decision. I thought this fight needed to be higher on the card, and it proved to be highly entertaining. Alexander Volkanovski is able to out-pressure and beat up Darren Elkins. Power shots, backing up Elkins, and just non-stop violence. Volkanovski with the decision victory. Alejandro Perez keeps it rolling too, being more active, being first to land, and taking a unanimous decision from Eddie Wineland. Kat Zingano out-grapples Marion Renault to pick up a unanimous decision, putting her right back in title contention there at 135 pounds. Chad Mendes feints the right, level change, comes back up with the big left hand, drops Mile Jury, followed up with a fury. Chad Mendes right back in there at 145 pounds. Volkanovski taking out Elkins, who was the number 10 fighter, and you had Mendes taking out the number 12 ranked Jury. Volkanovski early in the night had called out Mendes, I guess expecting this kind of performance. Mendes himself called out a top 5 foe. In one of the more astonishing knockouts I've ever seen, Nico Price takes out Randy Brown. Brown was on the wrong end of the offense in the first round until the waning seconds where he's able to land a step-in knee, had Price hurt right at the bell. In the second round, Price is trying to get the fight to the ground, ends up on his back, hunting for a leg lock. Will trying to escape. Brown leaves his face open, and devastating hammer fist from his back. Brown goes to sleep. Nico Price with the victory. Rick Glenn takes a split decision from Dennis Bermudez. Bermudez scored takedowns, but was inactive after that. Glenn with elbows and strong strikes at the distance gets a big decision, the split decision victory, as I said. Sage Northcutt rebounds from getting hurt early to take out Zach Ottawa. Hurt Ottawa with a jab while Ottawa's coming in, so it doubles up that force when you run into an object. And then while Ottawa was desperately scrambling for an ankle, hammer fist, actually the second. We had the first ever hammer fist knockout, Nico Price. The second ever followed up by Sage Northcutt in the co-main event. You go up to that main event, and 14 months away, Junior Dos Santos came back and looked like Junior Dos Santos, jabbing high and low, imprinting his fist into the liver of Beloy Ivanov. Ivanov landed some big haymakers and had opportunities in the fight, but couldn't capitalize. The continued footwork of Dos Santos never allowed Ivanov to be at his range. Santos kept things long, followed up with the right hand a couple times, smashed Ivanov, hit him with a couple beautiful punches to the eye, a little tentative in his return, but still looked very sharp. Junior Dos Santos proving that he was worthy of that number 7 ranking in the top 10 heavyweight division, in my opinion. Bellator brought it with a big weekend. The UFC, I thought, put together a really good card, even though it was a little strange where a couple people were in their positions. Volkanovski, Perez, hopefully they earn some more respect, and we will see them on the main card. Definitely Nico Price with a great win. Money Mendes is back. Same thing for Kat Zingano. Possibly the same thing for Junior Dos Santos. It was a fun weekend at MMA. just because you're not wrong doesn't mean you're right in Dana White's eyes. I mean, Stipe Miocic is definitely right. He deserves a rematch. He deserves the opportunity to get his title back and to face Daniel Cormier. He set the record. He held that heavyweight title longer than any man, defending it 3 times. Undoubtedly, Stipe Miocic deserves a title shot. Brock Lesnar, the word deserve is nowhere near his name, but the money that they can make from the fight, the UFC, WME, all parties involved, that's what matters. That's what's right. Because the question is, how do we make the most money? Not how do we find out who really the baddest man on the planet is. We had that opportunity. DC won. Unfortunately, Stipe Miocic is wrong. Dana White, we follow him now to this Tuesday night Contender Series. There's been a couple changes as normal. But at the top of the card, it's an amazing fight when you look at a for real prospect will come out of this main event in the women's strawweight division. Macy Barber versus Jamie Colleen. Barber 4-0. Her family owns a martial arts school. Her jiu-jitsu is on point. She can strike forwards and backwards. She can throw with combinations, throw with power. Very well-rounded. Macy Barber, undefeated. Had the opportunity to see her train while she was at the Jackson Wink Academy. Had the opportunity to watch her live in Vail, Colorado on the LFA card. Jamie Colleen, 1-1 against current UFC roster spot holding Daniel Taylor, who is a great striker, a lot of movement. Colleen coming from a Philadelphia Gracie school, top-notch grappling. I expect this to be an incredible show. Also, Chuboykin Oyenigecha, who I had a chance to talk to, but unfortunately the interview got lost. He's taking on short notice replacement, undefeated Anthony Adams. Explosive middleweights. Somebody is going to get knocked out. You also have in the co-main event, Domingo Pilarte against Vince Morales. 2 great bantamweights. Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Another one of those spots to see the up-and-coming top prospects in the MMA world right there if you have UFC Fight Pass. Thursday night, we get the return and the 4th installment, the 4th event of the season for the Pro Fighters League. So, event 4 means we're going back to some weight classes. We're going to see them now for the second time around, seeing the heavyweights and the featherweights. The main card is going to be littered with those featherweights. The main event having Lance Palmer against Thiran Jinjao, and Andre Harris versus Nazareno Meligari. You have Bibula Magomedov against Magomed Isidore. Francimar Barbosa versus Jack May. Those are what we're looking at for the main card. Also, Alexandra Almeida versus Steven Seiler. There you have a battle of 2 scrappy jiu-jitsu players at 145. Barbosa versus Jack. You got Barbosa usually wants to clinch. May angles moves, wants to use his kickboxing. Andre Harris is going to look to wrestle you down and beat up Meligari. Palmer going to mix it up. I like the favorites here on this card. Timur Valiev taking on Lee Corville. You got Alex Nicholson, who walked away with the biggest win, that flying knee knockout at PFL 1, taking on Felipe Lins. Both guys kind of undersized for heavyweight, but I like a spectacular brawl in that one. Jared Rosha against Kelvin Till. Till has to try to get space, look for the knockout. If he's not able to land the strikes, Rosha will grapple you and subdue you. Can he make weight is the question with Sean Jordan. He looks to take on Josh Copeland. Jordan most likely wants to strike, while Copeland is going to want to grapple in this one. And then Max Koga versus Marcos Goval is another phenomenal fight. I think that you're going to see Goval again pay for being undersized at 145 pounds. You have the 4th installment of the PFL on Friday night, or on Thursday night. Friday night, getting ahead of myself, getting all over the place. You do have on UFC Fight Pass Friday night Glory, the top kickboxing organization in the world, Glory 55 in New York. You have the main card on ESPN. You got the Glory Super Fight Series there on UFC Fight Pass. On the Super Fight Series, you'll see former welterweight champion Cedric Doumbé, not to mention the first ever female Glory champion, former Lion Fights champion, Tiffany Van Soos there on the Super Fight Series. The main card, Nick Chastain getting in the Glory ring for the first time. A LFA and Lion Fights vet. Incredible Muay Thai from that young man. A co-main event that's going to see Patapachme Kitamaru. Great Muay Thai against former title challenger Kevin Van Nostrand, former interim title holder. The main event for the middleweight title. Second time they're going to fight. It is a rematch. Can Alex Ferreira duplicate the performance and take down Yusuf Belgari once again? This Friday night with Glory on UFC Fight Pass. Also Friday night, Access TV LFA is in California. You got a UFC vet, welterweight, main event, Eric Silva against the Phoenix Nick Barnes. Jordan Wisniewski versus Ryan Lilly in the co-main event. Blake Troop versus James Cannon, also on that main card. Taylor Johnson versus Luke Bonhol at middleweight. Opening up the main card, Vincent Cachero versus Carlos Fuente Jr. Had a chance to talk with Vincent. Check out that interview here on the YouTube channel, Cage Minds MMA Show. So you have a full card there. That main event at 170. Eric Silva, you've seen him be explosive with his striking and his jiu-jitsu. Barnes, you've seen him be very technical till he got caught in his last fight by Curtis Millender. Also great submissions. I think this one is a war at 170. Something great to check out on Friday night. A lot of options. And we're not even all the way to Saturday yet. ACB 89 taking place also on Friday. Main event, Bellator vet Alexander Sarnowski versus Brazilian Henderson Batista. The cards also includes Matt Danzig and fellow UFC vet Daniel Sarafian. You have Saturday night, no UFC, because the ladies will take center stage on UFC Fight Pass from the Scottish Rite Temple in Kansas City, Missouri. You have Invicta FC 30. 3 fights to look at there that are going to be the ones to watch spotlighted. You have Heather Jo Clark, UFC tough vet, taking on Kimberly Novaes. You have Felicia Spencer, undefeated, taking on Ukrainian kickboxer Helena Kozniak. The main event, a battle for the atomweight title, Jin Yufrey and Mina Grishander. Somebody walks out with the 105 title. Grishander wants to get this to the ground. I think that Yufrey is the more well-rounded fighter. We'll see what plays out in the cage on Saturday night. Is there a weekend without UFC? No, there is not. The UFC is in Hamburg, Germany. Light heavyweight main event. The legend, Mauricio Shogun, who's been through so many wars, taking on Lionheart Anthony Smith, the Nebraskan who trains in Colorado with Factory X. This one is going to be a banger. I honestly think if it hits the ground, that Hua has the better ground game, but we'll see if the chin holds up. Been through so many wars. It's crazy to actually look at the records. Hua, 35 fights, and even though Smith, much younger, he has the more fights. 29 victories, 13 losses. We're talking about 42 fights, 7 more than Hua. Hua has been through some wars. Both guys are going to get chin checked and tested. Smith, though, looked great in his 205 debut against Rashad Evans. I'm not doubting Smith to pull an upset here. A lot of talk, though, that if Hua wins, He's next in line for Daniel Cormier at 205, so that then Cormier after that would get ready for Brock Lesnar. On short notice, replacing Alair Latifi in the co-main event, you have Corey Anderson taking on Glover Teixeira. Teixeira hits harder and is the more sound jiu-jitsu player, has had a very good ground game when he's turned to it. Anderson, on paper, the better wrestler, the younger guy. He comes with a high volume striking game, but he has to watch out to not get clipped by the big power of Teixeira. Again, it is a short notice fight. On the main card, you also have a heavyweight matchup that I gotta love. Marcin Tybura taking on Stefan Struve. Struve always seems to fall when he's against a top challenger. Right now, Tybura ranked a little higher than him. Tybura, the more technical striker, the more comfortable striker. He likes to play around the clinch, and I do like Struve's ability on the ground, even though it didn't look at its highest against Andrei Arlovsky. That's going to be a fun one in the heavyweight division. Not to mention, also on that main card, the light heavyweights. Mark DeCasey, explosive, dynamic, but has had some problems with his wrestling, taking on German Naseret Haverpast. And that is a big fight for the German fighter being there on the main card. On the prelims, you do have the sergeant from the German Navy, Nick Hein, taking on Demir Darjanov. Hein, you wonder, did he do what he needed to improve his striking? I like Dazarov because Hein hasn't shown big abilities to improve yet. Baraz Fabowinski meets Emil Meek in a contender, in a fight of the night contender in the welterweight division. Predict a war there. Heavyweights, you want to talk about an undefeated prospect that the UFC, that most of us keep overlooking. Justin Ledet, 9-0 at heavyweight, takes on Alexander Roderick. That one, somebody is going to get hit and knocked out. Look for Ledet. I'm really intrigued by his prospects, the technical boxing. And then on the Fight Pass prelims, at 205, Jeremy Kimball versus Darko Stonjak. Want to highlight that one. A fun little card, a Sunday card for the UFC main card. The main card getting started. This is all AM. Because we are overseas, it's going to be an early morning. Fight Pass gets you started, I believe, at, what are we saying, 7:30 Pacific. That is 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So for us here in the Mountain Time Zone like myself, Fight Pass prelims begin at 8:30. You're going to have an early day of fights. I believe the main card is getting kicked off at 2 p.m. Eastern, so that's noon here for us in the Mountain Time Zone. And you'll be done with fights by 3 on Sunday with the UFC in Germany. Nick Diaz voiced his disgruntlement on social media with Brock Lesnar getting a title shot. You almost want to agree with a lot of what he said before he talked about himself getting a title shot when you didn't know that the Diaz brothers wanted to be active. Not many great options. Everybody wants a big fight. And I myself would just like to see guys like Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov, them get rewarded for win streaks. You got Alexander Volkanovski, who is still on the prelims at 4-0 and a 14-fight win streak. You'd like to see a little bit more Bellator from the UFC, where they're showcasing a variety of young talent on their main cards. Or who knows how much the competing pay of promotions like One Championship, ACB, Fight Nights Global will start to make a difference with some young fighters. Not to mention, they all seem to come back around, though, because we did have Nikita Krylov, who turned down his UFC extension in favor of going back to fight in his homeland of Russia for Fight Nights Global. And with the UFC being in Russia in September, Fight Nights Global has allowed their champion, Krylov, who went there and won a title, went 4-0, I believe, in the promotion, to be released early from his contract in hopes of negotiating with the UFC. So, as many eyebrow-raising, Dana White pulling stunts, him and Brendan Schaub arguing on social media, or arguing with Couture, or arguing with Ortiz, or arguing with Alec Quinta, no matter how many of those stunts happen, in the end of the day, that UFC brand seems to still be just ironclad and holding strong. Looking at the local scene this coming weekend, on Saturday, there's a pair of events up in Colorado. The Sky Ute Casino is hosting King of the Cage Perennial. You have the King of the Cage women's atomweight title on the line. Jamie Hinshaw, B. Win. It's a rematch. Win took a split decision. The first fight, Hinshaw, this is the first time since a broken arm and since winning the title that she'll be able to defend it. Talk to Hinshaw. That's up at the Facebook page. We went live at Helix Coffee Shop, so go check that out. The same card is also going to see Sherwin Price going for the 165. That's the junior welterweight King of the Cage title, undefeated from Fit NHB. Hoping to get some words with him this week. Got news that Chris Brown from the Jackson Wink Academy, the future, the Houston Madman, Chris Breezy Brown, will be in action later this month in July 29th, for LFA 46, I believe, in Virginia. Gonna get an interview with him here this week too. Gonna be talking to a lot of people, so keep paying attention to Cage Minds. Got me off track a little bit there. Also on that King of the Cage card, Austin Lewis got word that Francisco Dominguez from Fit NHB is going to be fighting for an amateur flyweight #1 contender spot. So a lot of good fights on this King of the Cage card up in southern Colorado on Saturday. And in Clovis, Force of One Fighting Championships, the event is rescheduled from late April. We're talking about Warriors Path Fight to the End, where you have Paco Castillo versus Gene Perez in the main event. An article with an up-to-date card is up at cageminds.com. That's what's going on in the local scene. There's tons of boxing rumors flying around for August. Nothing nailed down yet, or nothing that I've received yet, except for telling you guys that on August 4th, we will have an amateur USA pro-style event going on at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center there in Santa Fe, brought to you by Santa Fe Lights Out Boxing. This has been Caged Minds Uncensored.